everyone, and welcome back to another episode of No Censorship Podcast. I'm Megan, your co-host, joined with James, and we're very excited for a different kind of episode today. Today's episode is all about conspiracy theories.
Get your tinfoil hats on for this one. It's gonna be a good episode.
So, James, we've had a couple people talk about conspiracy theories. We've had some audience hot takes come in. I want to ask you, do you believe in this whole phenomenon of conspiracy theories before we start the episode off?
Yeah, I love talking about them. I think they're a really interesting topic and, kind of give you those old school campfire or those old school friends sleepover type vibes where it's like 1 o'clock in the morning and you just start chatting rubbish to each other. I will say though, when I was doing what I wanted to research for this episode, I looked into some conspiracy theories that were found out to be true. And there are a lot of them that actually came true. So maybe the tinfoil hat theory that we've got going on here, we could be spitting facts in this episode, Who's to say that we're not? So I think not all of them have merit, but as we've been proven, some do. So it should be interesting and a little bit of fun. Something a bit different.
I'm really excited to hear what you are talking about and what conspiracy theory you have. So, if you haven't got it already, this episode is all about conspiracy theories. Now, the list is very long, I'm sure. So, we have picked one each that we really, really believe in and lean into, and perhaps found the most research or the most interesting. So, I might throw it to you, James, and get you to start us off.
All right. So, my conspiracy theory, kicking things off, I want you to think back to 10 years ago to 2016. Not politically, not culturally. I just want you to think about how that year felt. In 2026, social media is flooded with 2016 nostalgia. And don't get me wrong, for those of us in our teen years, it was incredible. But if you were around and paying attention, there was a moment somewhere around the mid-year where a lot of people started saying the same thing, completely independently of each other. Friends, strangers, commentators, philosophers, people who'd never entertained a conspiracy theory in their lives. They all said some version of the same sentence. Something is wrong with our reality. Now, that could just be a collective stress, mass anxiety, the internet amplifying shared unease. That's probably what most psychologists would tell you. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the conversation that emerged from 2016 wasn't just the world's going crazy, it was something much more specific, much more unsettling, and it had actually been building for over a decade before anyone noticed. This is the story of the simulation argument, the 2016 glitch, and the question that some of the smartest people on the planet still cannot answer. Are any of us actually real, or are we just part of a bigger simulation?
I love this. I haven't heard too much about this conspiracy theory. I've heard like cracks of it here and there. So I'm really excited about this one.
I remember being in 2016. I was 16, turning 17. I was in year 11. I was having the absolute time of my life. Me and my friends were just chatting rubbish. You had no responsibilities. Year 12 was a year away, so you're not thinking about that. You're not taking school too seriously. And I remember while I was doing this and forming the story for this episode, all these things kept coming back to me. And yeah, it paints this picture. And I remember having conversations with my friends at the time that this is so sus. What is going on right now? And maybe we are in a simulation. So it was nice to go down memory lane. And it's fitting because social media at the moment keeps romanticizing 2016. They think it was the best year of their life. The music was popping, the movies was popping, the games were popping, and all of that may be true. But let's dive a little bit deeper into this theory and where it could all stem from. So, To understand 2016, we have to go back to 2003 for just a moment. There's a philosopher at Oxford University named Nick Bostrom, and in 2003 he published what looked on the surface like a fairly dry academic paper. It was called Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? Now, Bostrom wasn't a fringe thinker. He wasn't posting on forums at 2 a.m. He was and still is one of the most cited philosophers working in existential risk and the future of humanity. He's the kind of person that governments and tech billionaires actually call when they want to understand where civilization is heading. And the paper laid out what he called the trilemma. He argued one of three things to be true. Option one: almost all civilization at our level of development go extinct before they ever develop the computing power to run detailed simulations of their own history. Option two: civilizations that do reach the level of computing power simply choose not to run those simulations, maybe for ethical reasons, maybe for resource reasons, maybe because they just don't bother. Or option three: we are almost certainly living inside of a simulation right now. His argument was statistical. If advanced civilizations eventually develop the ability to simulate entire worlds, complete with conscious beings, weather patterns, political systems, and history, they would likely run thousands of them, maybe millions, which means simulated realities would vastly outnumber the one base reality. And if that's true, the probability that you specifically are sitting in the one real version of events is essentially zero. The paper was published, it got attention in academic circles, and then, for most people, it sat there in 2003. Perhaps it was an interesting read, a theoretical read, but not something that got touched until 2016. Now let's get through what actually happened in 2016. Not as a political timeline, I want to go through it as a sequence of anomalies. We start off with January. David Bowie dies aged 69. He'd released an album 2 days earlier titled Black Star that in retrospect reads like a farewell letter so perfectly constructed it seems almost impossible. Critics called it a masterpiece. He'd hidden his illness from almost everyone. He was here, and then he wasn't, and the album existed as if he'd planned the whole exit. That same month, Alan Rickman dies, 69 years old. Cancer, also kept private. April, Prince dies. Unexpectedly, one of the most vital performing musicians of his generation. Gone at 57 from an accidental fentanyl overdose that nobody saw coming. May 28. A child falls into Cincinnati Gorilla Zoo enclosure and Harambe is killed, sparking debate why lethal force was used and not a tranquilizer, dividing the internet forever. June, Muhammad Ali dies, one of the most famous athletes in human history. Expected perhaps, he had been ill for years, but the weight of it on top of everything else was staggering. Then come the political votes. June, Brexit. The United Kingdom votes to leave the European Union. Every major poll had Remain winning comfortably. The result came in, and anchors on live television looked genuinely confused, like they were reading from the wrong script. November, the United States 2016 presidential election. Again, every major poll, every major predicting model, every statistical forecast pointed in one direction. The result went the other way. The facial expressions of the people calling the result on live television that night became memes because they looked like people experiencing something they genuinely could not process. And then, as if the year wanted to make a point, December, Carrie Fisher dies. Then her mother, Debbie Reynolds, dies the very next day from grief. Now, each of those events individually is explainable. People die, votes surprise pollsters, these things happen. But the accumulation of it, the rhythm of it, the way 2016 seemed to be systematically removing cultural touchstones, upending established certainties, and doing it all with a kind of escalating intensity, that's what people couldn't shake. And online, in forums, comment sections, Twitter threads, you name it, they were being read by millions of people, and a very specific theory started to gain traction. This simulation had been updated or rebooted or perhaps handed to somebody new. Here's where the story shifts from internet speculation to something you can't easily dismiss. In June 2016, right in the middle of all this, Elon Musk was on stage at the Code Conference in California. He was being interviewed in front of a live audience of tech journalists and investor. This wasn't a podcast. It wasn't a late night slip of the tongue. It was a formal, recorded, widely broadcasted conversation. And the interviewer asked him about the simulation argument. Elon Musk didn't laugh it off. He didn't deflect. He said, and I want to be precise here because the wording matters. He said the odds that we are living in what he called base reality are 1 in billions. He then explained his reasoning, which tracked almost exactly with Bostrom's. 40 years ago, he said we had Pong, 2 rectangles and a dot. Now we have photorealistic 3D environments with millions of players. If that rate of development continues, and given the trajectory of computing power, why wouldn't it eventually the distinction between a simulation and reality become indistinguishable? And at that point, simulated worlds will vastly outnumber the real one. Therefore, statistically, we are at that point. Now, the clip went everywhere because this wasn't a philosophy student. This wasn't a Reddit thread. This was one of the prominent technologists on the planet. The man building electric cars and rockets and satellites, saying with a straight face that he genuinely believes the world around you is probably not real. And the timing, June 2016. Brexit had just happened. The US election was 5 months away. The year was already feeling strange to millions of people. Musk's comment didn't create the conversation, but it legitimized it. It gave people permission to say the thing that they'd been feeling out loud. Now, this is where the Mandela Effect starts to come into play. Around the same period, another phenomenon was gaining momentum online that fed directly into this conversation. The Mandela Effect. Named after Nelson Mandela because a surprisingly large number of people have a vivid memory of him dying in prison in the 1980s. They remember the news coverage, they remember the funeral. Some remember a speech by his widow. And then they discovered he was released from prison in 1990, became president of South Africa, and actually died in 2013. Their memory was wrong, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt like a fact that they'd always known. Researchers and psychologists will tell you that this is a confabulation, the brain filling gaps with plausible invented detail, and perhaps they're right. But the Mandela effect grew into something bigger than just Nelson Mandela. People started cataloging shared false memories at scale. The Monopoly Man. Does he have a monocle? Most people are certain he does. He never has. Fruit of the Loom. Does the logo have a cornucopia? Millions of people remember it clearly. It doesn't, and apparently it never did. The Berenstein Bears, almost universally remembered as the Berenstein Bears, with an E. It has always been Berenstain, with an A. Now, again, psychologists can explain most of these. Memory is reconstructive. We fill gaps. We're influenced by similar words and images. This is a well-documented science. But the simulation crowd took these examples and asked a different question. What if some of these aren't false memories? What if they're accurate memories of a version of reality that was subsequently patched? What if the simulation gets updated and the patch changes details, but some people's memories retain the old data? A glitch. It's an unfalsified theory. You can't prove it, but here's the thing. You also can't disprove it. And in 2016, the distinction started to feel more important in a way it hadn't before. So before I finish up, I've got a small little section to go. What are your thoughts on this theory?
Well, firstly, I've got goosebumps because every time we talk about things that do with simulations, galaxies, I don't know if you've watched Interstellar, the movie. This gave me goosebumps too when there's all these different dimensions. It always freaks me out because when you sit there and you sit in it, you go, what even is this? I don't know if you have moments in life too where you go, I see the world from my eyes, but then someone else sees the world from their eyes. And so they're viewing you, but you've never viewed yourself. And then when you get down that whole hole of it all, it's just all crazy. And you're like, what even is the meaning of life? How are we even here? And obviously, then those people who are scientific will go, oh, well, it's all about like the Big Bang Theory and Adam and Eve, if you're, into that. So it's just really scary. And the Mandela Effect as well. Didn't know that came from, like, I knew it was to do with Nelson Mandela, but I'd never heard of that. But I've heard of all these theories that do with it. So that's like so scary that we thought that he died earlier than he did.
Yeah, it's very interesting because with the Nelson Mandela specifically, I remember thinking that he died, or someone told me that he died, or maybe I learned it at
Mm.
school. And then when he actually did die, I remember thinking that it was so weird. And I asked my parents, I thought he was already dead. And then they said, no, he wasn't. I don't know why you would think that.
Oh
So
my
that's a
God.
really good example. I also think deja vu is a really good example of
Yeah.
a glitch as well, where
Yeah.
we all collectively think something's happened before and we know it in every fiber of our being that we've
Yeah.
experienced this situation before, and you can't prove it and you can't recall when, but you just know something's off. Glitch.
Yes. I have heard that deja vu, and maybe another conspiracy theory here, I have heard that deja vu is real because it's your past life has experience that exact moment, and that's why you think you've lived through it because you actually have.
Mm, that's an interesting theory. There we go. We're going on a little deep dive down the rabbit hole here. I'm glad you got your conspiracy tinfoil hat on. Going back to the 2016 theory, when Bostrom wrote his paper in 2003, the simulation argument was purely philosophical, through experiment territory only. Then, when Elon Musk repeated it in 2016, it was still largely theoretical, but it was starting to feel more pressing because computing power was accelerating so fast. Now, in 2026, we have a new problem. We have AI generating images, videos, voices, and text that are indistinguishable from reality. We have deepfakes of public figures saying things that they never said. We have synthetic media that forensic experts struggle to detect. We have online personas, social media accounts, profile pictures, comment histories that are completely fabricated, interacting with real people who have no idea. They're purely bots. The boundary between what is real and what is generated has collapsed in a way that would have seemed like science fiction 10 years ago in 2016. And here's the question that's been sitting with me while putting this episode together. If we can already build digital environments that fool human perception, and we're still at the early stages of this technology, what does that say about the likelihood of Bostrom's third option? We are right now building the tools that would make a simulation possible. We are heading at speed towards the ability to run entire conscious worlds inside machines, which means one of two things is true. Either we will develop the ability and use it, in which case, statistically, we're probably already inside a version of it, or something will stop us from getting there. And if you think about what might stop an advanced civilization from ever reaching that point, well, perhaps that's something we discuss in another episode. Now, I'm not telling you the world isn't real. I'm not telling you 2016 was a cosmic patch update and David Bowie was a casualty of the software reboot. But I am telling you that some of the most serious minds working in physics, philosophy, and technology today think the question of whether we exist in base reality is genuinely open. Not settled, not laughable, open. It is perhaps a possibility. And I think that there's something important sitting within that, because if nothing else, if the whole simulation argument collapses under scrutiny tomorrow, it still asks us the right question. What do we actually know? How do we know it? And what does it mean to be certain of anything at all in the world where the ground keeps shifting beneath our feet? 2016 felt like a glitch. Maybe it was just a bad year. Or maybe somewhere they hit a key that they shouldn't have. The 2016 glitch theory.
Oh my god. Goosebumps. Oh, I
You know,
don't know.
as I was putting this together, I just kept thinking of more and more examples, and I'm sure the listeners will have their own. But just off the top of my head, think about all the flights that go missing that we can never find. Where did they
Yeah.
go? Did they just disappear? With all the technology that we have in the world, how do
Mm.
we not find remnants of these flights? It makes you wonder, is that just another glitch? Are we even real? Who knows?
This is scary stuff. I feel like my opinion on it is that if you don't believe that it's real or you don't think about it, it doesn't exist. So that's how I'm going to choose to proceed with life, knowing this now.
Yeah, look, that's fair. Probably closing your eyes to this might make you live a happier life.
It's scary though. It's really scary because once you start questioning everything, you really go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I think it's scary because if you really don't think the world is real, you could just have an existential crisis where you're like literally in your room fucking panicking, like praying to the demon or the gods or the code writers, whoever you think could be running this simulation, just praying that something changes. Or maybe you get an ounce of reality, you know? Who knows where it
Exactly.
could be? I don't know.
Exactly.
It's fun to talk about.
It is. And I mean, it goes down then when you talk about getting down on your knees. Well, then there's people who believe in religion and pray to certain gods. And then you go into questioning that. And what does that look like? So it takes you down a whole different rabbit hole. And you could honestly talk about this forever.
Yeah, you could. You definitely could. But yeah, a little bit of fun. I would love to
Love it.
hear what your conspiracy theory is. Hit me with it.
Yeah, well, loved yours, just to say. Great, 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 great job.
Thank you.
I went a different route. You kept saying this is not a political timeline. I'm only going to take you back 10 years. I chose political and I chose a lot more than 10 years that we need to go back. So
Okay. How far back are we going?
we are going back to 1975.
Hey,
So, the conspiracy theory that I chose to speak about, although there was a long list of things that I definitely could speak about, was did the CIA remove Australia's Prime Minister? Do you know what
okay.
Prime Minister I'm referring to?
Um, is it Harold Holt?
No, but there is actually a different conspiracy theory about him. So comment after this episode if you want us to talk about that. But
Okay.
different one.
All right. I'm ready. Hit me with it.
All right. So picture this. It's the 11th of November, 1975. A day in Australia that is supposed to be about remembrance, peace, and the end of a conflict. But inside the halls of Government House in Canberra, shout out, something extraordinary, something that never has happened before in a 75-year history of the Australian Commonwealth was about to unfold. Okay, so
Why did you do a shout out?
because we're from Canberra, so shout out.
Yeah, shout out, rep. Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right.
Okay, yeah, keep going, keep going.
So, this is a story about a man who was voted into power by the Australian people, who won not one, but two elections and was about to be removed from office. This man, and his name was Gough Whitlam, and what happened to him to this day remains the greatest political mystery in Australian history, apparently. The question is, was
Has to
this
be.
the most powerful intelligence agency on earth, the CIA, pulling strings behind the scenes? Thoughts so far?
Oh, considering I haven't heard of this one, I'm really intrigued. And I love that it's in our backyard here in Australia. So,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
thoughts are the CIA has done some crazy shit. So, I would
yeah.
not be surprised if there's any truth to this story. I'm
Mhm.
really eager to hear more, so let's go. Hit me with this.
So I want to start with what he did, just so you can get a sense of who this man was as a prime minister, especially for those who don't know him. So Gough Whitlam won the 1972 election, and essentially he introduced free university education, which is crazy. You could never hear of that these days. He abolished the white Australia policy, which is incredible. So, someone who really started this movement that defined the country for 70 years. He established legal aid, so that's making legal representation accessible to ordinary Australians who, in fact, couldn't afford a lawyer. And then created welfare benefits for single mothers, which is a really, really great scheme. This was for the first time. And then he changed the national anthem from God Save the Queen to Advance Australia Fair, because as you
Oh.
know, Australia run as part of the monarch. And then he also introduced the Racial Discrimination Act, one of the first pieces of legislation in the Western world to formally prohibit racial discrimination. And then one of the last things is that he laid the groundwork for Medicare. So, round of applause for him. Sounds like a great guy. Sounds
Yeah,
like he did a
yeah.
lot.
So in the 70s, he was very progressive.
Yeah. And it's funny, I did a couple like sense checks on people in my life. Have you heard of him? Did you like him or what you heard of, him? Not that they would know him personally. But it was very mixed. Some people liked him, some people like, oh, I don't know. So I guess it's just to show you when you're running for prime minister, you're either loved or hate.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that aspect of it never changes, right? Depending on the year, the media that you're going through, or the mediums.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. So, the thing about being a leader in the Cold War era is that you didn't just answer to your own people, you also answered quietly and sometimes not so quietly to the alliances that you hold with other countries, right? So,
Mm.
for Whitlam, he had a different idea of what alliances should look like. He actually pulled Australian troops out of Vietnam immediately upon taking office. So called the American bombing campaigns, and I pulled this quote out, corrupt and barbaric. So it's interesting to see how we work and serve our allies, but it feels like with America back then, he essentially played a very different game. Then we've got enter Richard Nixon. So he actually refused to invite Whitlam to the White House for 5 months after his election. This is all because of him pulling the troops and how he was playing the alliance, which is a really important, I guess, place and character for this story because this is when Whitlam started asking questions about a place called Pine Gap. Very interesting name, but really, really quickly, what it is. It's located 18 kilometres southwest of Alice Springs, right in the red heart of Australia, as remote and isolated as anywhere on the continent. Pine Gap is a joint Australian American intelligence facility that has been operating since 1966. Have you heard of this area?
No. Is it
Mm.
still active?
That is a great question. Should I look that up?
Yeah, look that up. Pull that up, Megan.
Is Pine Gap still active today? Quick Google search says yes, active and fully operational today, still located in Alice Springs.
Oh,
So, yeah,
shit. So he could be in the basement.
well, he could be. He could be.
Okay.
So yeah, it was described as this joint defense space research facility. But what it actually was, and what the Australian government was not fully told, was it was a critical node in the CIA's Global Signals Intelligence Network, and it was used to intercept satellite communications, monitor missile launches from the Soviet Union and China, and support covert operations across the Asia Pacific. So no wonder Whitlam was questioning what was happening here and what they were doing because there was a lot of the story they weren't saying as intelligence normally does. Back in the 1969, before he even became president, Whitlam actually, oh, not president, prime minister, Whitlam had visited Pine Gap twice as the opposition leader. And he came away saying, and these are essentially his words, that he didn't actually know what the facility was for and that the public had a right to know. So he wanted people to be aware of what was happening there and what was going on. And that obviously raised some eyebrows, right? As you would assume.
Mm, mm.
So when he came to power in 1972, he started pressing the defense establishment for answers. And what he got for years was half truths and stonewalls. And the head of his own defense department as well had been withholding the full picture. So it wasn't until November of 1975, literally the month of his dismissal, that Whitlam was finally told the truth that Pine Gap was a CIA operation. So think about that for a moment. The Prime Minister of Australia, the man responsible for the defense and security of the nation, was lied to by his own party on behalf of a foreign intelligence agency for 3 years.
Oh, hang on. I'm getting some signals with my tinfoil hat here. It's getting a bit hot. This is a juicy story here.
I think
Damn,
he's coming. He might be coming to you live from Pine Gap. Who knows?
he actually might be. Have you seen Stranger Things where Eleven
No.
goes in the facility and they're like probing her and testing her to get her powers stronger? That could be down there with him.
Maybe that was inspired by Pine Gap and Gough Whitlam. Who knows? Maybe the Americans are saying more than they more than they know.
Maybe.
As you can imagine, when he found out, he was very furious. And when he got angry, he actually went on the offense. So, probably not great in his defense, but fair enough. You've been lied to for 3 years and it was all happening right under your nose. So then in 1974, in April, Whitlam announced publicly that Australia would not be extending or renewing any foreign military installations on Australian soil. So that's a pretty big deal back then. The Pine Gap lease was due to expire on the 10th of December 1975, for context. And then he
Okay.
did something even more explosive. He threatened to expose Richard Stallings, the CIA station chief operating undercover in Australia, by name in Parliament. And my understanding is obviously when you're in intelligence, one can't talk about what you're doing, you can't talk about the fact that you're in intelligence, and sometimes you go by an alias name. So the fact that Whitlam was willing to literally put his head on a platter was probably a bit crazy, especially when you're dealing with overseas alliances and countries that you might be in war with.
So while you're going through this story, correct me if I'm jumping the gun too early, but is there a death involved here? Because I don't know much about this former prime minister. So maybe there's people listening that are like, oh my God, you're such an idiot. How do you not know? But did he die? Is that where this story is going to go? And it's kind of like they covered it up and he's actually, got taken away.
Well, apparently that's what happened to Harold Holt, the other prime minister, but this is not a story about death. This is a
Okay.
story about someone being removed as like a prime minister because they perhaps knew too much information. Now, my question is if he kept probing and provoking, I wonder if it would have gotten to that point if he hadn't backed down.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that's why I kept thinking about that because you kept saying he gets removed, and I just
Mm-hmm.
automatically thought like he got removed, like yeah, they took him out, like they killed him, like that's
Yeah,
it, gone to
yeah,
sleep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, basically nearly through it, but essentially Australia was, or the Australian intelligence team were issued a formal warning from the CIA, and this was about their own prime minister. So just to kind of summarize, it was about you need to basically tell him to back down and kind of chill out a little bit because we're getting to some territory that we're essentially not allowed to talk about and we're not allowed to provoke. So it was getting pretty serious and scary. And I think what's funny is if you were living through this time and just a member of the Australian population, I feel like you wouldn't even know that this was going on. And that's what's scary is things like this probably are happening right now in government under our noses, and there could be from a scale of 1 to 10 out of 9, and we just don't know because everything's just so covered up.
The more you dive into these conspiracy theories, you almost
Mm.
create a reality where it could be perceived real, and then you start thinking of how it could then be real, and then you
Mm-hmm.
just start to believe it, and then you become a nut job. So,
Yeah, well, exactly. So we're getting to the end of the conspiracy theory, or just a couple of the facts. And look, I have briefed over a lot of the certain names and people involved. So if you have time and you're interested, obviously go look this up more. But we're getting to the date of November 11th, 1975, which I spoke about at the start. It was 1:15 in the afternoon. Sir John Kerr called Whitlam to the government house and essentially fired him. So he dismissed Australia's elected Prime Minister, immediately after installed Malcolm Fraser as the caretaker Prime Minister, and dissolved both houses of Parliament. So he essentially then, or how Whitlam took it, is he emerged on the steps of Parliament House in Canberra. And apparently, this is one of the most famous political speeches in Australian history. His final words to the crowd were, "Well, may we say God save the Queen, because nothing will save the Governor General." And that's how he
ooh,
exited. Yep. And just keep in
wow!
mind
So
this
that's it.
guy,
Literally famous last words.
and keep in mind he changed the lyrics, if you will, in the national anthem to remove anything to do with God save the Queen and changed it to Advance Australia's Fair. So for him to say that as his final words is a little bit chilling. And
Yeah.
I will say, just to add, like 50 years on, right, where we're at, there has been multiple pieces of evidence come through on people saying that, yeah, that's what went on, and that's why they think he got stepped down. I think something that the listener might ask is, okay, who cares? But at this time, people didn't know why he got dismissed. People thought that he left. There was kind of rumors on, yes, he got stepped down because maybe something else was going on, but it wasn't uncovered until later that there was any involvement with the CIA, or that he got dismissed or fired, or that people wanted to take him out of Parliament for basically asking too many questions and poking in the wrong places. So I think it's just an interesting kind of take.
Yeah. That was a really interesting conspiracy theory. I think there's plausible theories to this. Obviously, we'll never know, but I think back to
Mm,
what the world was like in the 70s during the Cold War period that you mentioned.
mm,
America was a powerhouse. They still are a
mm,
powerhouse, don't get me wrong. But back then, if you were perceived to be going against America, you obviously wouldn't want that. Like the risk
100%.
of going against such a strong ally could leave so many threats to your own country or your other allies if they're seen to be associated with you. So perhaps there is some
Exactly.
truth to this that they wanted him removed because he could just be too big of a risk. And Australia
Yeah.
was not the country that it was now back in the 70s. So some would argue
Yeah.
that it was better back then. I mean, agree to disagree, but
Yeah. And I guess we won't ever know because we didn't live through that time, but it's just funny to your point. Like, we even see the current Prime Minister really making sure that our alliance with America is strong, not to go into politics because that's not what we talk about here. But, I guess that theme really, maybe what we see from the back of this conspiracy theory is that prime ministers that come really make sure that they smooth over the relationship with America, and really making sure we do our role as a country, as an alliance.
yeah. Well, perhaps it goes back to are we in a simulation theory? They were just
Yeah.
playing around with the game at that point in time. They thought he got a little bit boring and they switched him out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, those were our two conspiracy theories. I will say we tried to keep it a little bit different. We know that you can have, the JFK conspiracy theory, Princess Diana. So we just thought, let's change it up.
The conspiracy theories that we had were quite fun.
Mm.
You're doing the audience segment now, I believe, not me. So what have our audience listeners submitted? What have we got?
just for context, in case you missed the last episode, and if you have, make sure you go listen to it right after this. But we have started to change the format a little bit, and at the end of every episode, we reach out to our audience members prior to the episodes to send in their thoughts and theories that go with what we're talking about. So I have them in front of me. There are 4 conspiracy theories.
Okay.
Number 1. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
The Titanic was a hit job. Hear me out.
Ooh.
3 wealthy guys who opposed the creation of the US Federal Reserve, basically America's version of the RBA, John, Benjamin, and Isidore, all died on the Titanic in 1912. Meanwhile, JP Morgan, a powerful banker who supported central banking and owned the company behind the ship, was meant to be on board and cancelled last minute. Convenient. Interesting. I did not know this.
No, I didn't know this. There are a lot of Titanic theories floating around.
Yeah.
Some are that
Yeah.
it wasn't real or that it vanished, or, the list goes on with the
Yeah.
Titanic, but I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. Well, it goes on to say then the Federal Reserve gets created the very next year in 1913. So the conspiracy is that Morgan and the Rothschild banking crowd basically put people who disagreed with them on a luxury cruise and said, enjoy the iceberg. RIP to those 3 guys, and honestly, the animals on board too. They also didn't even have a water slide on the ship, so that's also sad. It was no carnival cruise.
No, it wasn't a Carnival cruise. Titanic walked so Carnival could run.
Yeah. That's so good. That is so good.
Yeah, I mean, look, if that theory is true, they would have had to have some advanced technology, perhaps access to the simulation to plot where the iceberg is. So yeah, I'm getting a bit hot under this tinfoil hat.
I controversially think that it's not true because you're telling me that someone organized this ship to kill the thousands of however many people on there just to get rid of 3 people.
Well, some people would say that's the price you pay when you need to
That's
get rid of 3 highly what's the word? Highly
influential.
powered, yeah, highly
Yeah.
important, high position people.
That's crazy to me.
Well, I guess that's why it's a conspiracy theory. We'll never know.
Yeah, I guess we'll never know.
All right, hit
Mean
me
that?
with number 2.
All right. Number 2, your phone is listening to you.
Oh God, here we go. What nut job sent that one in?
So, this one is that your iPhone is literally a surveillance device you voluntarily carry everywhere. It's got microphones, location tracking, behavioral monitoring, and apps collecting data 24/7. Ever casually complained about needing private health because their dentist is absolutely rinsing you every 6 months and suddenly Booper ads start popping up on the Facebook timeline? Yeah, you're not alone. People talk about this all the time and I don't even fully know what Booper does, so that makes sense. Tech companies say it's just incredibly accurate prediction based on search history, location, and browsing patterns, but I barely know what I want for dinner tomorrow. The technology absolutely exists for phones to capture way more information than companies admit. So, yeah, nice try, Google.
Well, there is a bit of truth to this one. I remember
Mm.
at uni learning that data is the most valuable key research or key resource, I guess. So that's the number one thing companies want because it's the most valuable. And then something came out that there were programmatic advertising based on your phone listening to you. And when you accept the terms and conditions, you're giving that application permission to listen to your microphone. So there
Mm-hmm.
is truth to this. Whether it's every single platform, who knows? But there
Mm.
definitely is truth to this. So maybe this nut job is onto something.
You know what's funny is I know you're spitting facts because I vividly remember you presenting on programmatic advertising at university in front of everyone in Malaysia or Singapore. So I remember this to a T. So I know you've done the research here on this.
Yeah, dude, we're the number one podcast for Gen Z because we're the smartest Gen Zs around. Like, come on, if you're not following this podcast, you're missing out.
Oh no, my star fell. Hang
Oh
on, let me
no.
put my stuff back on. All right. I mean, my thoughts on this is like, I didn't think this was fake news. I think it's like, if it's not real, I don't know how the hell the ads pop up that pop up.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to it. Hot take, I would actually rather have tailored advertisements towards me than non-targeted ads because I would at least have advertising that I'm slightly interested in or perhaps need
Mm,
than something I
mm,
don't. And that's why they
mm.
do it because it works.
So true. So true. All right, two more. Conspiracy number 3. The water is a pharmaceutical side hustle.
What?
Did I say that right? Pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical? Is that how you say that?
No, pharmaceutical.
Okay. The water is a pharmaceutical side hustle.
I'm keeping that in.
What? That doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, let me read on.
The-
Modern water treatment plants were built decades ago, long before people were flushing antidepressants, birth control hormones, and pesticides into the system every day. Those chemicals don't fully get filtered out, so tiny amounts cycle through rivers and go straight back into the tap. One example is atrazine, a pesticide scientists found can mess with hormones in animals. Studies show male frogs exposed to it developing female reproductive traits. Or, as Alex Jones put it, it makes the frogs
okay.
gay.
Oh
Okay.
God. No, I don't agree with this at all.
Wait,
I
there's still more.
no.
There's still
There's
more.
there's
So,
more.
yeah. So the frogs are out here going through a hormonal plot twist, and we're all just drinking the same water like it's sparkling mineral. The theory is that everyone knows these chemicals affect hormone systems, but fixing the system would cost billions. And the same companies selling the chemicals are also selling the medications and treatments for the problems they might be helping create. So tap water becomes a subscription service for your endocrine system. We love capitalism. Wait, am I going to get cancelled for saying this?
Well, it's our podcast. We write the rules. I this is the biggest nut job I've ever heard who submitted this one. I don't agree with this at all. Multiple reasons for it. Number one, the people working for these companies would be drinking the same water. Number two, we don't drink recycling water. We drink water from other sources. Recycling water gets used to other places. That's why they say don't drink this water, it's recycled, or don't drink this water, it's coming from like the storm system. So we don't drink those water sources, so we're not getting the things that they're claiming are flushed down. Like that's just not true. And then third of all, I don't think they're that smart to do something like this.
I'm sorry, I'm just like shook about this one. Like, I don't really get it, but then, that's what a conspiracy theory is. There's people that get it and people who don't.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, last one. What have we got?
Yeah. My thoughts on that one was no comment. So let me go into number 4. Um, okay, number 4. Mattress stores are a money laundering front. God.
Oh God.
Have you noticed there are way too many mattress stores? Like just a casual main road with a GYG and 6 mattress shops, and they're always completely empty because how often do you actually need to buy a bed? Mattresses are also the ideal product for money laundering. They're expensive, people rarely compare prices, and nobody knows what a mattress should actually cost. One sale could easily explain thousands of dollars moving through the store. Plus, mattresses last like 10 years, so there's no logical reason a suburb needs 20 mattresses stores within a 5-kilometer radius. So the theory is simple. Those places aren't actually selling mattresses. The mattresses are there just to make the money look legitimate. Also, rug stores. Those are sus as well. How many people do you know buying Persian rugs other than your granny? Sent from
Yeah.
my.
The Persian rug store one, I do kind of agree with. Like, I used to live on the street where they sold a Persian rug store, and I would walk up and down that street almost every day. I used to work near that rug store as well. Not once did I see anyone buy a rug from that store, and then they almost had a closing down sale, and then a couple weeks later they removed the sign. So, yeah, that's sus.
That's so sus. Unless that's a marketing tactic that they had where they said closing down made a bunch of money and then they're like, oh, hang on, we could make sales. Let's just like say
Yeah,
that.
maybe, something like that is super suspicious. Mattress stores, that is a good one. Just because you don't need a mattress doesn't mean other people do. Think about how many people constantly moving interstate to your city, international students coming in, international students leaving, etc. There's a lot of people always moving in. So just because you don't need a mattress doesn't mean other people don't. But perhaps 10 in the same suburb, too much. I wouldn't be surprised
Mm,
if some of them are money laundering.
mm. I mean, I haven't really noticed this, but now I will keep a good eye because it's a great point. I feel that way about how many HSP kebab places there are. But,
Oh,
you
you're going to
know,
trigger a lot of people with that one.
maybe delete that one. Don't add that in. All right, well, that concludes our episode on conspiracy theories. Hopefully, you feel intellectually stimulated from that, or hopefully, you still like us after putting forward some weird, controversial conspiracy theories that you absolutely do not agree with.
Yeah, well, hope you've had fun. A little bit of a different episode for the No Censorship podcast. Let us know if you like the format in the comment section. Give us a like, rating, and a follow on Spotify or wherever you stream. And be sure to keep an eye out on our social media channels to be part of the audience segment. And we will catch you on the next podcast. Bye.
Bye.